In 1987, audiences got a double dose of the Austrian oak. One was the biggest success of his career up to that point. The other was not. Don't touch that dial. It's time to run and pun with one of the silliest B-movies of Arnold's career, The Running Man. Hello there, cutie pies, and welcome back to Every Arnold Movie Ever, episode 14. The story of The Running Man begins in 1982, when a man named George Linder, who made a fortune in lightweight wheelchairs for Paralympic athletes, found a paperback book in an airport bookstore that caught his eye. That book was The Running Man by Richard Bachman. Now, Linder was sucked in by the story, and he could actually see the movie trailer playing out in his mind as he read it, and for whatever reason, he decided he should be the one to make the movie. So he reached out to the author's agent to option the book. He was shocked to discover this unknown author's price was exorbitant. It didn't deter Linder, though. He shelled out $20,000, then set out to find a producer to partner with. That led him to Rob Cohen, who we now know as the director of The Fast and the Furious and XXX and Very Bad Things. Not the movie, but like, very bad things. But at the time, he was cutting his teeth as a studio executive. Cohen could not believe that Linder made such a bad deal on the option. And that's when they discovered, oh shit, Richard Bachman is not a real person. We're actually dealing with Stephen King. By this point, it's common knowledge Richard Bachman is a pen name of Stephen King. But back in the day, for a couple of years, he got away with it. The general rule of thumb back then was that an author shouldn't release more than one book per year. But if you know anything about Stephen King, you know he is an insanely prolific writer. It makes me angry and jealous how much he writes, but especially in the 80s when he was fueled by massive amounts of talent and he had a stockpile of cocaine material to release. And so he did it under the pseudonym Richard Bachman. By 1982, he had released 4 books under the Bachman name, and it would be another 3 years before anyone figured out Bachman wasn't a real person. The Running Man book takes place in a dystopian future where those desperate for money participate in deadly TV game shows for the entertainment of the public. The main character is Ben Richards, a scrawny, poor man with a sick daughter and a wife who turns to prostitution to make enough money for medicine for their child. Richards goes to the Games Network and is chosen to appear in The Running Man, their most popular, most deadly game. No contestant has survived. Will Richards be the first? Now, in 1985, the film version was set to start shooting with Christopher Reeve as Ben Richards. It's not entirely clear what happened, but delays caused Reeve to drop out. Arnold Schwarzenegger's name came up, but Cohen knew if he took the project to Arnold, the script would have to be tailored to him. So he reached out to Joel Silver, who Arnold worked with on Commando and also Predator, and Silver recommended Steven D'Souza for a rewrite. D'Souza had already written Commando for Arnold, so he was acutely aware of Arnold's style. This meant no more emaciated protagonist, obviously. It also meant toning down the more depressing aspects of the book, in particular, the sick child and the prostitute wife. Sorry, prostitute wife, you gotta go, hit the streets. Not like that, but just like, get out of here. He also updated the television show aspect. Bachman's version was modeled after game shows in the 1950s. It was very antiquated. D'Souza updated it and gave it more of a satirical bent, gaudier and flashier, with a dose of WWF-inspired stalkers to chase down Richards. Once the script was in decent enough shape, they took it to Arnold, and as I mentioned in my Predator review, which you can click on and watch right here, unless you're watching this on a cell phone, in which case I'm just pointing to a random part of my room. And so, just so I'm not being called a liar, I'm going to put that episode right here for you to watch. It's very tiny and sped up, but as I'm mentioning right now in that review, production on Predator was shut down after the first Hunter costume proved so disastrous that no amount of Jean-Claude Van Damming could save it. That left Arnold with 8 months of downtime, just long enough to take on The Running Man. Arnold agreed to this version of the movie, along with a $5 million paycheck. his biggest paycheck to date, $2 million more than The Predator, and the budget ballooned from $10 million to $27 million. Linder had to sell his wheelchair company just to cover the budget. Now, for director, they went through several different options, including Rambo Part 2 director George Penn Cosmatos, before settling on Andrew Davis, who directed Code of Silence, a Chuck Norris movie, and would go on to do a couple early Seagal movies, and most importantly, The Fugitive. In regards to Davis, Arnold said,
I did become part of the decision-making in a lot of films, with power to approve the script, approve the cast, and to choose the director. But I still made it my rule that once you pick a director, you have to have total faith in him. You may have picked the wrong guy, but still you cannot fight throughout the movie.
I always thought the casting for this movie was interesting, and it turns out, same person who cast Predator and Commando, Jackie Birch, also cast The Running Man. The Stalkers are all professional athletes: Jim Brown, football legend; Erlen von Lith, the wrestler; Gus Rethwish, strongman; Toru Tanaka, wrestler; and of course, Jesse Ventura, who came over with Arnold during the Predator hiatus. And you know who else is in this movie? Arnold's old bodybuilding buddy, Sven-Ole Thorsen, who I have mentioned numerous times. Just mentioned him in Predator. He was in Raw Deal. He's actually been in 13 of Arnold's movies, including a bunch of other movies like Mallrats. He was LaFours in that. And he's like mostly an Easter egg to discover, in a shot or two before he gets shot 1 or 2 times and killed. But in The Running Man, he gets fairly extensive screen time. He has a line, and he actually has something resembling a character arc. One of these days we'll dig a little deeper into Sven, but for now, let's leave him as an Easter egg. On the protagonist side, Mick Fleetwood and Dweezil Zappa were cast as revolutionaries, and Maria Conchita Alonso, the great Yaphet Kotto, and Marvin McIntyre were cast as Arnold's fellow runners. And probably the most ingenious casting of all was that of longtime game show host Richard Dawson as the main villain, Killian. Here's a man who's been in people's homes hosting television shows since 1960. And they know him as a good-natured, if a little creepy in retrospect.
Come here. So rude. Is that... Thank you, Doc. Well, I tell you honestly, we've been on the air, I think, a year and a half. That's the first time on those introductions I've ever gotten aroused.
A little creepy. Here he parodies himself, and he's a worthy adversary for Arnold. Did not expect that. A lot of Arnold movies have him fighting against a system, and in particular, against older men in power. Commando, Raw Deal, Running Man, Total Recall. Dawson is easily the best of the bunch because he brings some real shit-heel dirtbag energy. And he mixes that with the persona that everyone's seen on TV for so many years, and then turns it on its head. Filming began on September 29th, 1986, and ended October 7th, 1986. Just 8 days into filming. Did they shoot it really quickly? No. Davis was already behind schedule, 8 days into the movie, and $400,000 over budget. So Rob Cohen fired him. In addition to those scheduling problems, D'Souza wasn't thrilled with Davis's ideas. According to D'Souza, Andy said, "Listen, I have a great idea. At the end of the movie, when they break into the studio, they're cornered. They're trapped. Then Arnold reaches into his pocket and takes out one of the exploding hockey pucks, throws it, and kills the guards." Rob and I look at each other and he says, that makes Arnold look pretty shitty. He had this thing in his pocket for the whole movie where the whole supporting cast is getting killed and he uses it to save his own ass. We're not doing that. But when Davis shot that scene, which is one of the first scenes they did, he improvised Arnold pocketing one of the hockey pucks and it pissed everyone off. Now, there's a little bit of a disagreement about what happened next. Cohen says he showed the footage to Arnold, but Arnold had a different story.
The producers and studio executives staged a coup on the set while I was away for a few days promoting the springtime bodybuilding championships in Columbus. It was a terrible decision.
Either way, Davis was out, and they'd hired Paul Michael Glazer, a TV director and also Starsky from Starsky and Hutch. This was his first movie, and he was basically brought in as a hired gun to plug the holes in the sinking ship.
I mean, if the film worked, I was a hero, and if it didn't work, poor Andy was the bad guy.
The score is by Harold Faltermeyer, who's legendary because he came up with two of the most iconic scores of the 80s, Axel F. from Beverly Hills Cop, and the Top Gun theme. Two songs anyone can easily play on anything including a cat piano. The score here is also very synthy. It's just way less iconic, but I do like the piano hook with its weird, sharp notes. And also sounds like it could have been the inspiration for Garth Marenghi's Dark Place.
I'm Garth Marenghi.
The Running Man opens with a crawl explaining this dystopian future, and then we meet Ben Richards. He's now a law enforcement helicopter pilot, refusing an order to fire upon a food riot of civilians just trying to eat.
The hell with you. I will not fire on helpless people.
He's arrested and sent to a labor camp, subbing out a tree in commando for a giant steel beam. And he's now rocking this sweet beard, the first beard of his career, and not the last facial hair he sports in this movie either. He's become buddies with these guys, Laughlin and Weiss, and they've cooked up a plan to escape. Only one problem: they're wearing kill collars, which will explode the second you breach the perimeter. They start a riot, and 6 minutes and 50 seconds into the movie, we get our first pun from Ben.
Give you a lift?
Mark it down, that is a record for Arnold. 6 minutes and 50 seconds, already tossing out a pun. And as Weiss tries to shut down the perimeter, one of the prisoners, Chico, gets ahead of himself, which costs him his head. Great effect here, though. They escape and meet up with the revolutionaries led by Mick Fleetwood in some hilarious old man makeup that is completely ridiculous. Oh, never mind. Mick removes their collars, but believes Richards is a murderer.
He's the butcher of Bakersfield.
Come on, Mick. You can see through that crap. It's network propaganda.
Richards refuses a call to action to help the revolution.
My brother is gonna get me out of the city. Plus, I'm not into politics. I'm into survival.
Then it's off to ICS to meet Killian, the head of the network. He's complaining that his ratings have stagnated. He's a total showbiz prick, exemplified when a janitor accidentally bumps into him. Of course, Killian's nice to him to his face, but we know he's gonna fire this guy's ass.
Brenda, if that asshole is mopping the floor tomorrow, you'll be mopping it for the rest of the week. Let's go!
Ben goes to his brother's apartment, but finds a random woman living there. He confronts her while she's watching Captain Freedom do some jazzercise.
Leave your message.
And we also get this file photo of Ben with a stash. Our first Arnold stash sighting since The Long Goodbye. It all comes back to The Long Goodbye. Ben questions Amber and finds out she moved in a month ago, and his brother was sent off for re-education, whatever that means. Ben absorbs that info for about, half a second, and then we never hear about his brother again. He gone. Amber tries to escape, but Ben stops her and decides he's going to use her for a cover story as a married couple going to Hawaii. It's a bad plan, and it won't work, but he doesn't know that yet. Meanwhile, Killian sees footage of Ben's escape, and he basically falls in love. This guy is the antidote to their ratings lag. Killian wants him for The Running Man, a show where stalkers chase down and kill quote-unquote criminals for entertainment. There's a joke about getting the president's agent on the phone, a nod to Reagan, and also a little prediction of politics to come. Ben and Amber head to the airport with Ben sporting this wonderful disguise. Yeah, throw a hat on, loud shirt, nobody will recognize you, giant man. Also earlier, his disguise was a Gold's Gym t-shirt and just like construction worker's hat, where it's like, yeah, you'll never notice me. Look, I got a lunch pail. Here's one of my favorite moments when he threatens her by saying,
Now remember, I can break your neck like a chicken's.
And when I was a kid, I just thought that was like a lost in translation way of Arnold saying chicken. But it's not chickens, plural. It's not, I'll break a neck like a chicken's. It's chicken with an apostrophe S. I'll break your neck as if it were a chicken's neck. Either way, it's hilarious, and it doesn't sway Amber from fingering Ben. Get your mind out of the gutter. The cops catch him, and it's off to ICS.
Hi, cutie pie. You know, one of us is in deep trouble.
Now, Killian's able to convince Ben to enter The Running Man by threatening to put Weiss and Laughlin on the show in his place. Ben agrees, and he's prepared for the games. I love this moment when his court-appointed talent agent offers Ben to sign the contract on his back.
Here. Use my back, victim.
That always freaked me out, especially like when he's trying to grab the pen, but he can't reach it. Ugh. And here comes Killian to host The Running Man. Richard Dawson, he's so natural. He's just being himself, basically, in these scenes. And they introduce Ben to the world and show a heavily edited video of the beginning of the movie.
The crowd is unarmed. Repeat, unarmed. Abort attack.
The hell with you.
There are innocent unarmed people down there. Cease fire! Cease fire!
It's incredible that ICS had the actual footage from the movie that we're watching to drop in to their game show. Ben is framed as the villain here, and they reveal his wonderfully silly blue and yellow spandex outfit. Sponsored by Adidas. The rules are explained. The runner has to get through 4 zones inhabited by stalkers, and if he does, he wins. We're given a glimmer of hope for the runner. There were winners last season on The Running Man.
You remember them? Whitman, Price, and Haddad.
Then Killian shows just how much of an asshole he is when he reveals Weiss and Laughlin will also be joining Ben in the game after all. This leads to my favorite exchange in the entire movie.
Killian, I'll be back.
Yes, it's repeating Arnold's iconic line from Terminator, which he already did in Commando.
I'll be back, Benny.
But this is the first time we're seeing it turned on its head. In Commando, it was simply a straightforward callback, that ping of recognition. And it almost seems like Killian recognizes it too. But I love how he stopped in his tracks, a mix of surprise, maybe a little fear, and then you can see the gears turning too, searching for a retort. And retort he does.
Only in a rerun.
It's a perfect in-character response that actually elevates the catchphrase from mere nostalgia pop into something that makes sense in the context of the movie. Richards and his friends are sent on this super fun sled ride. They get herded to the first stalker, Sub-Zero, whose gimmick is murder goalie. Also, he's wearing an insane cup. Dude, what is that? They fight Sub-Zero in an ice rink setting, and Ben is able to dispatch him pretty quickly with an accompanying one-liner.
Hey, Killian! Here is Sub-Zero! Now, Plane Zero!
Isn't Plane Zero technically better than Sub-Zero? Oh, I love how the crowd reacts in stunned silence and even sadness for this poor guy. But here's where Running Man makes the calculation that more is better. Not satisfied with the sub-plane joke, they give Ben a post-mortem pun.
Sure glad we took care of Sub-Zero.
Yeah, he was a real pain in the neck.
And it reminds me of that great moment in Commando when he says,
I lied.
but he can't resist following it up with,
I let him go.
in Commando, it's the only time they did it, so it was funny, but The Running Man does not show the same restraint as Commando. And I can't believe I just suggested that Commando shows anything resembling restraint. Off that shocking death, Killian asks a man in the audience to decide the next stalker. The guy can't make up his mind, so Killian sends both. Buzzsaw, guess what his gimmick is, and Dynamo, whose gimmick you probably can't guess because he is a tiny car driving, electricity shooting opera singer covered in light brights. At this point you start to notice how cheap these costumes look, but it's not until later that we find out these designs are actually intentional. Meanwhile, Amber's snooping through the ICS files and discovers there is Butcher of Bakersfield raw footage, but she gets caught by Sven and is added to the game. The reasons they give the audience for why she deserves to join the game are hilarious.
She cheated on college exams, had sexual relationships with 2, sometimes 3 different men in a year.
And then Dynamo drives this stupid little car around, looks like a rejected G.I. Joe toy. Can you tell I don't like Dynamo? Weiss is trying to figure out a way to stop the broadcast, and honestly, this is the role they should have cast Shane Black in, because this script needed way more work than Predator. Laughlin saves Ben from Buzzsaw, then Ben takes out Buzzsaw by sawing his balls off. Not a great catchphrase here.
The saw's part of me, and I'm gonna make it part of you. That's alright. Keep it.
But don't you worry, he's gonna get a second chance. Weiss gives Amber a relay code to remember, and I would have completely just forgotten it within 4 seconds, especially with those double 17s. Are you kidding me?
17.
Do not give me a code to anything that's longer than 4 numbers. I will forget it, and we will all get killed. Speaking of getting killed, Weiss gets fried by Dynamo, and Ben goes to help out Amber. He gets a lot of mileage out of making fun of Dynamo.
Hey, lighthead! Hey, Christmas tree! Follow me, light bulb!
And I'm glad he makes fun of him, because Dynamo sucks. He's awful. I have no idea why he drives this car, or why he sings opera, but he does both, and he even puts down this useless little roll bar, and he's just so stupid. He drives his car up a pile of junk to try and chase after Ben, and just hilariously crashes. Boom, that's it. It's the dumbest moment of the movie. Dynamo, fucking you suck, dude. Unfortunately, Ben spares his life, which means A, Dynamo doesn't get killed, and B, we don't get a punny one-liner. What the fuck? But the filmmakers knew we would react that way, so they have Amber ask what happened to Buzzsaw.
What happened to Buzzsaw?
He had to split.
At this point, Killian is starting to get desperate. He tries to recruit Ben and make him a stalker himself, and I just love Ben's unhinged response.
But I hope you leave enough room for my fist, because I'm going to ram it into your stomach and break your goddamn spine!
Just classic Arnold rage there. So we get another stalker, and here comes Jim Brown as Fireball. Clearly the inspiration for Stephen Strange and Doctor Strange 2. At this point, the audience is turning and starting to support Ben, as exemplified by this tropey woman who does the old lady says something surprising joke.
That boy's one mean motherfucker.
And there's a funny callback.
We should have taken a trip to Hawaii.
And Arnold says,
I had the shirt for it, but you fucked it up.
Fireball shows up, Ben and Amber run, and unfortunately, we don't get any funny runs from Arnold like in Raw Deal or Hercules. Disappointing, especially for a movie called The Running Man, where he's running all the time. Amber stumbles upon the previous winners, who, it turns out, are not on a beach. They are in heaven, or hell, or, nowhere. Fireball shows up, but Ben outsmarts him, one-liners him.
How about the light?
Then puts another hat on a hat, as they say, with...
What a hothead.
And just when it seems they are out of stalkers, Captain Freedom comes out of retirement. Sort of. Jesse Ventura enters the control room with this cheap aluminum costume and refuses to fight. Killian insults Ventura, but more importantly, he insults Sven.
What's the matter? Steroids make you deaf? Get him out of here now!
And since Freedom refused to fight, they decide to manipulate footage to make it seem like Captain Freedom is fighting Amber and Ben. This is set up before we see it, so you know going in that the footage isn't real. But still, it's pretty upsetting to see Amber get her neck snapped and Arnold mangled and mutilated on screen. More on this scene later. Mick Fleetwood shows up and saves Richards and Amber, and Ben is convinced to lead the resistance. Ben, of course, brings back...
I told Killian I'd be back. I wouldn't want to be a liar.
It kind of diminishes the greatness of their earlier exchange. Once again, this movie does not know when to quit. Amber produces the Butcher of Bakersfield footage, and they set off to expose the network. As Killian is wrapping up the show, the rebels jack the signal and reveal the truth. What really happened in Bakersfield and what happened to Whitman, Price, and Haddad.
Remember them? There they are at this very moment, basking under the Maui sun.
The thing this movie didn't predict was that if that happened today, the audience would just shout, "Fake news!" But here, the audience buys it, especially when Ben shows up in the flesh to shoot a gun for a little bit.
It's showtime.
And just when it looks like we're wrapping things up, goddamn Dynamo returns to confront Amber. And I hate that he's in his undies. Ugh, he's the worst. She dispatches him with some water like he's the Wicked Witch, more like Wicked Bitch. And then Arnold confronts Killian.
Hello, cutie pie. One of us is in deep trouble.
Sven shows up and his character arc is complete.
Do you want to talk to Mr. Richards?
I got to score some steroids.
And now it's down to Killian and Richards. And Dawson is so good here. Wheeling and dealing with Ben, keeping his cool, trying to do what he's done his whole life, talk his way out of it.
This is television, that's all it is. It's nothing to do with people, it's to do with the ratings.
This time, it doesn't work. And with the roles reversed, Killian tells Richards to drop dead, and Ben says,
I don't do requests.
Which, fine, just seems like a random thing to say. I do like the look Arnold gives Killian, but don't worry. You know with this movie, Arnold, again, is gonna get a second chance at a one-liner. Killian takes a ride on the sled, but there is no net for him. He crashes into his own billboard, and then Ben says,
Well, that hit the spot.
And I love that and hate myself for it. Amber shows up and apparently this was a romantic relationship because we get this sexy 80s song. This is no game. A kiss. And then he grabs her by the neck like a chicken's. I guess that's a callback?
I can break your neck like a chicken's.
Ah, memories. And that's The Running Man. The Running Man was released on November 13th, 1987, delayed so it wouldn't compete with Arnold's other movie that year, Predator. Predator was a summer success. The Running Man was a fall flop, only mustering $38 million on a $27 million budget. It did make more than Raw Deal, Conan the Destroyer, and Red Sonja, but that was offset by its ballooning budget. Suddenly, Arnold taking a $5 million salary came with a higher threshold for box office success. He needed mega hits. And there was plenty of blame to go around. According to Steven D'Souza, before it was released, The Running Man had one of the best test screenings he ever attended. And originally, that scene where Ben and Amber are killed by Jesse Ventura, the audience wasn't let in on the fact that it was fake. So when Maria Conchita Alonso gets killed, the audience was in shock. And they cheered even harder for Ben to exact revenge. But then he gets killed, and the audience loses their mind. Now, they may have gotten the test audience with that, but they were also a little confused because there were some effects shots missing. It wasn't entirely clear what was going on. So an executive stepped in and said, hey, why don't you just reveal what you're going to do beforehand and show that it's going to be fake, and then the audience won't be so confused, which is such an executive note. D'Souza feels all the suspense of that scene was removed and the movie suffered because of it. I don't know if that was the only reason why it wasn't a hit. But he wasn't the only one disappointed in some of the decisions made. Stephen King was never on board with the casting of Arnold and felt the movie strayed too far from the book. So he asked to have his name removed from promotional materials. That probably would have helped it. And Arnold himself also had some blame to give out to the director.
Glazer was from the TV world, and he shot the movie like it was a television show, losing all the deeper themes. As a result, The Running Man didn't turn out as well as it should have. With such a terrific concept, it should have been a $150 million movie. Instead, the film was totally screwed up by hiring a first-time director and not giving him time to prepare.
Reviews reflected some of these feelings. They lean mostly positive, but seized on the silliness. Siskel was once again angry and over Arnold.
And yes, I'm afraid I'm getting tired even now of Arnold Schwarzenegger with his cute throwaway lines during unending fights. I was not excited by The Running Man.
But he did like the rocket sled.
I mean, once you go down the tube, that's kind of neat, especially the way that makes the turn. But then over and over, it got a little boring.
It turns, whee! But unlike Predator, Ebert couldn't muster up a strong defense.
I wasn't excited either. I agree with you that the villains were not really set up into really interesting individual characters, but they were just kind of like, targets in an arcade game.
However, he did have high praise for Richard Dawson.
And his performance is fascinating. He seems about half crocked all the time, always smoking that king-size cigarette, talking about his ratings. He's playing with human lives, and all he really cares about is the adulation of those faceless masses who cheer him on. I think that performance, if you took it out of the movie and just looked at it individually, is as interesting in its way as an indictment of television as Network was.
There's some decent satire here. We did have an actor as president at the time, and the blending of entertainment and politics was starting to happen. That comes into focus whenever we're backstage at ICS. They have these references to the Justice Department Entertainment Division. But it's all pretty surface level and fleeting and just kind of tossed off little jokes here and there. What they do get right is the prediction of where television was heading. We didn't have reality TV in 1987. We don't have state-sanctioned televised murder yet, but this was years before The Real World, Joe Millionaire, Survivor, The Mole, I don't know. Love is Blind, that's a new one. Also, the idea of deepfakes. Seeing Arnold get killed on camera as the hero was incredibly unsettling to me as a kid, even though I knew it was fake. It felt kind of cheap and mean, and I can't even imagine the effect it would have had if they held off on that reveal. The only time we've seen Arnold die on camera before was the Terminator, but he was playing a remorseless cyborg, so there was no emotional attachment there. At this point, I loved Arnold. He was invincible, and then I see him here getting unceremoniously killed by Jesse the Body Ventura. It was weird. Made me feel sad. I didn't like it. In retrospect, The Running Man's prediction of reality TV and politics as entertainment are seen as more prescient than initially thought, but it's generally overshadowed by the silliness, because make no mistake, The Running Man is a very silly movie, especially compared to the book. I read the book. Well, I had someone read it to me. I listened to it on audiobook. I didn't hire a butler to read it out loud. And the book is serious. It's cynical. It's very angry. Richards is full of contempt for everyone. He and Arnold share that snarky attitude, but Richards in the book is so much more desperate and has much more at stake than Richards in the film. The majority of the runtime, though, is Arnold running through dingy, dark sets, battling these over-the-top villains in hilariously chintzy costumes. And as a lifelong wrestling fan, I recognize the similarities between the Stalkers and wrestlers. At that time, WWF was about as cartoonish as the Stalkers, but they actually had more depth. The one character they give an ounce of backstory to, Captain Freedom, he disappears with no real resolution to his story. He literally is just like, I've had enough, and then he leaves. His arc is very similar to Sven's, but Sven actually gets the better ending. It makes me wonder if that was supposed to be Jesse Ventura at the end, and for some reason they changed it. I also think they could have done more with the set design and tailored the zones to each character. The only one they actually do it with is the first one, Sub-Zero, in the hockey rink, and then they just kind of give up. Everything else is just rubble and concrete, and it gets really repetitive. And let's talk about Arnold running up a record number of punny one-liners stacked on top of each other for a minute. In theory, it's a natural progression from Commando, but in practice, it's an overcorrection. See, too much reliance on catchphrases robs Arnold's character of depth and undercuts the movie itself. Arnold has maintained that the humor he adds to the movie is there to break the tension of the action and violence, but there's a delicate balance. You don't break that tension enough, and your movie can get pretty grim. Break it too often, and whoops, well, now you're accidentally a comedy. That's where The Running Man lands. And guess what? I'm okay with that. This movie is so fun. It's also super dumb, but it's fine. It's okay. This is not in the same league as Terminator or Predator or Total Recall, but it succeeds on a Commando camp level. It's disposable, but entertaining as hell, and it has the best use of I'll be back outside of the Terminator movies. And Arnold's performance as a wronged man fighting for his life is firmly in that Commando performance space. Elevated, broad, over-the-top, quippy, not nearly as disciplined as Predator or Terminator. He gets to play around a little more, but he sacrifices depth in his character. This, along with Commando, kind of solidified Arnold's one-liner persona for the public. Sometimes that was a negative. It was easy to dip into parody. But overall, it allowed the public to accept Arnold as a star, and he would quickly use that image to subvert expectations of the types of movies he should be making. It just takes him a few movies to find the right balance. It's a great movie for a 12-year-old, which is about the time I saw it. Not too violent, not too deep, not too complex. Arnold fights his way through wacky villains using his wits and words, and it has a satisfying ending that works thanks to the dynamic between Arnold and Richard Dawson. You can tell they are striving for more. They wanted this to be a thoughtful satire wrapped in an action movie. They didn't get there. But that's exactly what makes Arnold great. It's a high-wire act that can come crashing down at any moment. The smallest tweaks to his formula can make the difference between an all-time classic or a big, dumb, disposable diversion. And I like both of those, and everything in between. All right, let's get to the stats. Acting chops, 6. Very broad, cartoonish performance that relies heavily on puns and one-liners. Kill count, 14 for a total of 288. Catchphrase, this is a conditional one. It's gonna be, I'll be back, but mostly for Killian's response. And here are the updated every Arnold movie ever rankings. You got your cameos. Here are your bottom 6, no changes there. Hercules in New York, always gonna be at the bottom, poor guy. Number 6, The Running Man. This was another toss-up for me between 6 and 5 because I do have a soft spot for Running Man. But I think Pumping Iron is more substantial to Arnold's overall career, so that stays at number 5. Number 4, Conan the Barbarian. Number 3, Commando. Number 2, Predator. Number 1, The Terminator. Next up, it's time for a movie that I did not expect to be, nor want to be, as timely as it is, but here we are. Schwarzenegger teams with the Warriors and 48 Hours director Walter Hill and a comedy legend, sibling Jim Belushi, for Red Heat. See you guys then.
Meow, 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 meow. Meow, 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 meow.